Okay, we're going to start pretty soon, so if you can start, wrapping up your conversations and either finding a seat if you're staying or else moving out into the hall if you're not staying. We'll get started here in just a couple minutes. And if you're here and you don't have a handout, there's a one-page handout on this table in the gap here that we'll be using today as a guide for our Discovery Bible Studies. So there was a whole packet from the previous weeks, but if you didn't come before and you're just here today, just that one-page handout would be fine. No. Okay, well, that quieted down actually faster than I thought it would compared to all the talking that was going on a couple of minutes ago. So again, if you're just came in and you don't have a handout, if you have the packet from the previous weeks, that's good. But if you forgot it or if you're new this week, there's just a one-page handout up here that has the questions that'll guide us through the Discovery Bible Study. So this is week 4 of the series on discipleship and mentoring. So we've covered, several topics related to discipleship and mentoring, especially in the first 2 weeks. And then last week and this week, we're focusing on actually doing a method of Bible study together that can be effective for discipleship. It's used in the organization that Beth and I work for, working with international students with ISI. We call it M28, which just comes from Matthew 28, the Great Commission about making disciples. It also can be called Discovery Bible Study. So I'll just briefly again review kind of the format and how that works, especially for those who might be new, or also review for those that were here before. And then we're going to spend the most of our time breaking up into some groups and actually doing a Discovery Bible Study together using Luke chapter 5, 1 through 11. But before I do that, each session we've been starting with one story. We recently, about 3 weeks ago, got back from 6-week travel overseas to 5 different countries, so we experienced a lot of things. So we're just telling you kind of one story from the trip, which hopefully also somehow relates to discipling and mentoring as well. And so Beth's going to tell you a story of something that took place in Japan.
So the man I'm going to talk to about today, we did disciple years ago. He was in our house. He lived with us 2005, 6, 7, somewhere around there. He's Japanese, and when he came to the United States, he came first to study English and then to do his undergrad. But he lived in our home, and he came to know Jesus while he lived in our home, and he was very excited about his faith. He's excitable guy, excited about a lot of things, really excited about the Lord. He went on a missions trip. He went to Bible studies. Everything was great, and then he returned to Japan, and he returned to Japan and went to church when he first got there. But the society in Japan, it's kind of hard to live as a Christian in Japan. Certainly not impossible, but there's a lot of things that pull you, and one of the things is there's not many Christians around you, so you really have to seek fellowship, and that's one thing about my bottom line of this is when students go back to Japan, to any country, they need to find fellowship, and they need to stick with fellowship. And learning about that part of the wheel, fellowship, I think is so important when we have people with us, because not just students that go back to other countries, but people that move to another place in our country, finding fellowship is key. So anyway, he went back, and he was in fellowship for a while, but as most men do, he met a girl, and she was not a Christian, and she became his wife. And she's a really nice girl, but she's not a Christian. And that started to pull him away. And at first, I think he went to church for a while, but they had 2 children. it gets busy when one person's not going and one person's going. It's just so much easier to go in the same direction. So he went in the same direction. He's still a Christian, but he hasn't been to church in a long time. They haven't taught their children about Christ. So that's where he is. So we went, he was not in Tokyo where we were. We went up to Mito to meet him and visit with him. His wife had a headache that day, so she didn't come out with us. But he brought his older child. She's older. He brought his older child, his daughter, with us, and we went sightseeing for the day. And just things came up, and we were talking. We talked about the Lord some, and he said, I kind of wish that we had a church. I kind of wish I was doing that, but it's a matter of time. I really don't have time. And my daughter went to an organization for a while that was run by a church. We weren't happy with it. There was weird stuff, so we just have never gone. And so that was kind of all of our discussion there. But we had prayed, we pre-prayed before we met him that day, prayed little bits in between. We're praying for him. And then the idea was we were going to go back after dinner and just meet his wife before he took us back to our train. Oh, we'd stayed there. Okay, back to our hotel. Yeah. So we went to his apartment, and we found his wife and the younger boy in the car, looking around in the car. And turns out she was searching for the house key. She had taken the little boy grocery shopping, and they came back, and she couldn't find her house key. And they only have one. Well, they have two, but one was locked in the house. And the other one was supposedly with her, but she couldn't find it anywhere. So she was crawling around kind of upset. I was meeting her for the first time. She was very polite and nice, but definitely intent on finding the key. And so he helped her search for a while we sat in the car, and then they didn't find it. So he came back to the car, and he was pretty upset, and he said, we're going to have to call a locksmith. It's really expensive, but we don't know what else to do, but we got to get you back to your hotel. So she's going to keep looking. I'm going to take you guys back to the hotel. So that's how it went. But on the way to the hotel, I thought, we need to pray about this situation. I said to him, can I just pray about this situation? And he said, yeah, sure. So I just prayed. And after I prayed, it was like 30 seconds, something like that. His phone rang, and it was her, and she found the key. And we all were just kind of amazed, but shouldn't be amazed. I prayed, right? I shouldn't be shocked. I prayed that the key would be found, and it was found. And so I said, you should tell her about that. And he was so excited, and he said, I will tell her. I'm going to tell her of this story. And the little girl seemed pretty excited, too. And so that's the end of the story that we know it. We just got one email afterwards that they were so happy to see us, and his daughter wanted to see us again, and all positive. But we have been praying since then that God would use that key story, because he was happy to go home and tell her about the lost key and that it was found. And God can use little things like that when you think you don't have an in, when you think that the conversation's over, then God does something like that and makes somebody lose a key that he knows exactly where it is. And so, yeah, we're just praying for our friend now and for his wife.
Okay, thank you. So just to briefly review how this Discovery Bible Study goes. So on the handout, it's called Discovery Bible Study Group Cheat Sheet. So it gives you kind of the format. So the first part, so we're going to be breaking into groups. You'll just kind of be turning around where you are with groups of, say, 5 to 8, something like that. We don't want the groups too big. And the first part, before you get in the Bible study, is the first two questions there is, what are you thankful for this week? And what problems do you have this week? Now, this format we use a lot of times for non-believers, but even though they're non-believers, this is a way of beginning to get them, experiencing some of what Christian fellowship is about. We can, even if we don't use those terms, if we don't use the prayer terms, we can still say, what was something good that happened last week? What was something you were stressed about? And they can tell you, and then you can turn that into a prayer of thanksgiving and a prayer for what they're concerned about. So anyway, but it's also for Christian fellowship. This is what we often do in our small groups anyway, when we begin. So, you could easily spend the whole 45 minutes or an hour just doing that. So, try to limit it to, say, 15 minutes for your group. But, each person maybe share one thing if you want to, or at least give them the chance to share one thing in each category. and then have one person, maybe the group facilitator, to then say a prayer to thank God for those things and to pray for those things that they were struggling with. So each group will need a facilitator. So we would like somebody to do it this week that didn't do it last week, so somebody else has a chance. But also, if you were not here last week and did not experience the group, then it's better to let somebody else who was here last week, who at least experienced it, to facilitate this time. And Beth and I also will not facilitate this time, but will participate in the groups. All right, so once you do those first few, then you read the passage. So today we're doing Luke 5, 1 through 11, which is a narrative passage. So this method actually, works best on narrative passages, although last week we used it on a teaching passage related to loving your enemies. But this time it'll be Luke 5, 1 through 11, which is about followers leave everything to follow Jesus. So first you'll read it through as a group, and then you're going to read it again. So you could either second time have people just listen while one people reads, or else maybe read it in a different translation. So then after you've read it, you ask somebody, can somebody in the group summarize this? So again, this is not the time to give your applications and take-homes. You're just starting the process. You're just summarizing the story. Okay, it might seem very obvious, like we just read it. We all know what happened, but somebody just summarize the main idea of the story. And then after that, then you go into the questions. You say, what caught your attention from this when you read this? What caught your attention? It could be something you liked, or it could be something that bothered you, or anything else that caught your attention. So let a few people share about that. Excuse me. What caught their attention, what they liked, or what bothered them. Those three questions kind of go together under that. And then after that, I don't know what happened to my voice. This happens sometimes. After that, you go down to the three questions that you don't want to skip. It's what does this passage tell us about God? Of course, this is a narrative passage about Jesus. So in Jesus, we believe was God, the Son of God. So if you want to modify that, what does it tell us about Jesus? And or God, you can do that. Then what does it tell us about about people, about us as humans? And then third, what does it tell us about living to please God? So there you're beginning to think about application. And that then kind of relates, if you go to obey, again, to kind of simplify, just go to the third bullet point under obey. If this passage is true, again, we put that in there because we often do this with non-believers who don't necessarily believe the Bible's the Word of God yet. Of course, in this setting, we do believe the Bible's the Word of God. So if you want to leave that part off, you can. But how does this passage change the way you live? So that relates to the previous question. What does the passage tell us about living to please God? So here's where you want to think, even specifically like this coming week, is there something I could do differently or think differently because of this passage? And then, just kind of focus on those, and then somebody could, pray and wrap up. All right, and a couple other things. When we do this, we want to keep the focus on the passage rather than, you might think of something from another part of the Bible that relates or comes to mind, but we want to try, not to keep bringing in other passages or not to bring in what you heard from a sermon or what you looked up in a commentary, but keep the focus on the passage. There is a place for commentaries and for people who are scholars and experts. I enjoy that side of things as well. And but in this particular method, we're trying to just let the passage speak to us. It's a way to, when we force ourselves to do it this way, I think sometimes we can find it to be a fresh experience to see discover what this passage itself is saying to us and how it applies to our lives. All right, so we're going to do that for, let's say, until 12 o'clock. And then we're going to come back. I think we want to be out, completely finished by 12:10 to go downstairs for lunch. So then we'll reconvene and let one person from each group share a little bit. This time we're going to focus on sharing something from the passage. So I'll ask each group one of these questions, like not all of the questions to every group, but maybe I'll ask one group. What was something that your group noticed that stood out to you from the passage? Maybe I'll ask another group, what did this group see? What does it say about God? And so forth. So we'll just get a little bit of feedback that way from the groups. All right, so let's just kind of find a group you can join. Kind of, it's a little bit awkward because the chairs don't turn around well, but do your best. And again, try not to make the groups too big, so maybe not more than, say, 5 to 8 people. And so we'll probably have, I don't know, 5 or 6 groups. So go ahead, take a minute to get organized for that. And then first thing you'll have to do is agree on a facilitator. Somebody could volunteer or somebody might nominate someone. But it should be someone that was here last week who experienced this but did not lead it last week. All right. Okay, so let's go ahead and get organized.